didn't do it inside. So the Gemara that we were learning was talking about an interesting idea of using unconsecrated funds for part of a sacrifice and finishing off the payment of that sacrifice with consecrated funds, with Meiser Sheni money. Or an alternative method was using one of the animals, with buying that animal with unconsecrated funds and buying additional animals. We're talking about a Shalmei Chagiga, a certain sacrifice for the holiday. And we're talking about being able to use consecrated funds for the Shalmei Chagiga, for the holiday sacrifice. And we mentioned the two different opinions. We had Rabbi Yochanan, we had Chizkiah, two different opinions as to how this was done. Could you combine the money with money and buy one big sacrifice of which would include consecrated monies and consecrated monies? Or would you have a number of animals, and one of them would be unconsecrated animal, completely unconsecrated. The other animals would be completely consecrated animals, animals that were from Meiser Sheni money, and that was an additional option. So we had two, or I shouldn't say additional option, a different opinion. Both of these views at this point seem to be contradictory, meaning they do not agree on anything. One of them says that you can combine money with money, unconsecrated money with consecrated money, and buy one big animal.
Oh.
And part of it would be consecrated, part of it would be unconsecrated. And the other, in this opinion, would not allow you to buy many animals, that one would be unconsecrated, others would be consecrated. They only allow you to combine the monies together. The other opinion says you cannot combine the monies together, but you could buy additional animals. You could buy one totally unconsecrated animal and other animals that are consecrated. So these were two exclusive opinions that don't agree with each other. And the Gemara said that we learn that some of it has to be unconsecrated because it says misas, a tribute. So the Gemara asks at the end of this whole discussion, and we're on page 8a, I'm just going to read it inside. We are 8 or 9 lines up from the bottom of the page. My mashma dahai misas lishna dechulin. How do we know that this term misas, which means a tribute, that it means a tribute from unconsecrated funds? And the Gemara answers, Dechsiv, as it says, by Yosem Hamelach Achashverosh Masal Haaretz, King Achashverosh placed a tribute on the people, on the land. And when you place a tax on the people, you obviously are expecting them to give from their money, not from money they owe you for other reasons. So it's obviously unconsecrated money, and that's the word mas. And here also where it says mitas, it would refer to money that is unconsecrated, that you do not have an obligation to give, and that is what you're going to be giving. So there has to definitely be unconsecrated money for this Shalmei Chagiga. However, the Gemara said that we also have a source that you could include consecrated money as well, and the question was how that could be. What was the source for that? It said, "Ka'asher yivarechecha Hashem alekecha," as Hashem blesses you, which means you have other blessings that are, so to speak, given. They're part of the gifts of Hashem to you, which would be like Meiser Sheni, where you're able to enjoy from the gifts that Hashem is blessing you with, and that would be acceptable for Shalmei Chagiga as well. How do you reconcile these two statements, these two verses, where one verse says misas, meaning unconsecrated, the other one says ka'asher yivarechacha, as Hashem blesses you, which would include consecrated. So that on that we have these two opinions in our Gemara of either combining the monies, consecrated and unconsecrated, or having animals, different animals, some animals consecrated, and as long as you have one animal that's unconsecrated. So that these were the two opinions, and that's the end of that Gemara. Although we will see this Gemara come up again on the next page, on the next side of page 8b. It will discuss it, and it will bring an alternative view that allows both options. So until now, we only know of the exclusive opinions that these two rabbis do not agree with each other on anything of regarding this law, and there is going to be an alternative opinion where that says that you can actually, both opinions are correct, and you could do both. And he's going to somehow explain a brisa that we learn to fit with both opinions. So that we'll soon see. The next Gemara at the bottom of page 8a, it talks about fulfilling one's obligation of Shalmei Simcha. Shalmei Simcha is the rejoicing peace offering. And we've mentioned before that you don't necessarily need to bring a special offering to fulfill the rejoicing offering, as long as you are bringing a offering for other reasons. As long as you're eating from that offering, that would be considered your rejoicing offering. So you would fulfill your obligation of having rejoicing with other sacrifices as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be an exclusive sacrifice that's specially brought for rejoicing. Even if you're bringing other sacrifices and you're enjoying it, you're eating meat, you would be fulfilling the mitzvah of rejoicing. So you don't have to bring a special rejoicing sacrifice if you have other meat, other sacrificial meat. So this is the brisa. This is was based on the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Yisrael yotzin yedei chayvasan b'nedarim u'nedavos. It said in the Mishnah that a regular Israelite could fulfill his obligation of simcha with his sacrifices that he needs to bring. In other words, he made pledges, let's say a few months earlier. So he's now got to bring those sacrifices to Jerusalem. So those pledges, he could actually kill two birds with one stone. He brings those sacrifices because he pledged them. But at the same time, he's also fulfilling his rejoicing obligation on the additional days of the holiday to rejoice for all 7 days. He can fulfill that with those pledges that he promised. So Yisrael yotzin yedei chayvasan b'nedarim u'nedavos, Israelite can fulfill his obligation with these pledges. And we mentioned also that Kohanim have a way to fulfill their obligation with Israelites, with an Israelite's chatas and asham, with an Israelite sin offering, and Kohen can fulfill his obligation by having Bechar, the firstborn of the animal, is brought as a sacrifice. Or the Kohen has other ways as well. He can have the chazeh and shaik, which is the chazeh is the chest and the thigh that he gets from the peace offerings. Now, all of these are considered ways of fulfilling the obligation of Shalmei Simcha. So now the Gemara brings a brisa. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis learned in a brisa regarding the pasuk that it says on Sukkos, v'samachta b'chagecha. It says you should rejoice in your holiday. Now, because it doesn't say a specific sacrifice, it implies l'rabbis kol minei smachos. It implies all types of simchas, and that's all it needs. All you need to have is simcha. It doesn't say specifically a shlamim or how, what type of a sacrifice it should be. All types, kol minei smachos. And as long as you have this meat to sacrificial meat, you're fine. Actually, I skipped the word. L'simcha. The rabbis kol minei smachos l'simcha. For simcha, for joy. For this mitzvah of joy. And you don't have to bring a special sacrifice for this mitzvah. You could fulfill it with all types. Mikan amru chachamim. From here, the rabbis said, Yisrael yotzin yedei chayvasan b'nedarim u'nedavos, that an Israelite will fulfill his obligation of shalmei simcha with nedarim and nedavos, with his pledges. Uvamaiser behema, he could fulfill his obligation of simcha also when he has an animal that he has to tithe. In other words, he had animals were born to him between the previous holiday and this holiday. And so what do you do with those animals? You bring them, you bring the 10th of them, 1/10 of them, to the Beis Hamikdash for a korban called Meiser Behema. So you can fulfill your obligation of Shalmei Simcha with Meiser Behema, with bringing that tithe. I heard a nice shot in the name of Rav Pam. He said, why do you have to count each animal till you get to the 10th? Make it simple. I know my animals gave birth to 10 animals. I'll just take one. I have to count each one. One goes through, second one goes through the fence, through the gate. A third one goes through the gate. Then finally, the 10th one goes through the gate. I touch it with the red marker. Why red ink, red paint? Why can't I just say one of them is Meiser? I'll pick it. This is Meiser. I have to put all through a gate. He says an interesting point. He says it's hard for people to give charity. So in order to make it easier, the Torah tells you, you know how you have to do it? Put one through the gate. This is mine. A second one through the gate. This is for me. A third one through the gate. This is for me. A fourth one through the gate. This is for me. And you're constantly saying, this animal is for me. This is for me. This is for me. This is for me. By the 10th one, you finally say, oh, okay, I'll give it to Hashem. So the 10th one you give to Hashem, it makes it a little easier to donate it to Hashem when you're counting, when you're saying, this is for me so many times. So the 10th one, it's easier to say this is for Hashem. And so you give the 10th one to Hashem. So that's called Meiser Behema. So when you count each of those newly born animals to your flock, and you tithe them. There's the 10th one is touched with this red ink, and becomes a korban Meiser, and that animal is, you can fulfill your obligation to on the holiday of you have an obligation of peace offering, of simcha, of joy. You could actually fulfill your obligation with that. So you have nedarim, nedavos, two types of pledges. You have meiser behema, that the tithing of the behema, which is something that you can benefit, you can eat from it in Yerushalayim, and the koyanim, b'chatas v'asham, they actually have other options. They can eat from a sin offering or a guilt offering. Does someone have a question? So the koyanim can fulfill their obligation with the sin offering, the guilt offering, and ubabachar, with the firstborn animals that were given Sharon said they have to give the firstborn to the kohen. The kohen it's a carbon b'chor, and the kohen gets to eat from that animal. And the v'chaz of a shaik, and also the chest and the thigh of carbon shlamims, of peace offerings. Those all go to the kohenim. So the kohenim have many options of having shalmei simcha, the joy sacrifice. They have additional options. The Israelite has some options. The kohen has other options as well, because all the chatos, asham, and the bechor, and they could fulfill their obligation of having this sacrificial meat to rejoice with. The Gemara then says, maybe maybe you would think that you could fulfill your obligation with oif, with birds, and with meal offerings, right? Why not? Why can't you fulfill your rejoicing with these offerings as well? You should be able to have a meal offering, or the chicken, you like chicken. Fulfill your obligation with bird offerings, not chicken. The bird offerings were a turtle dove, or a dove or a turtle dove. Yeah. So why can't you fulfill your obligation with those? So the Gemara says that we learn from a pasuk, Talmud Laimer v'samachta b'chagecha, that it says you should rejoice on your chag, that anything that's acceptable for the carbon chagiga is acceptable for the carbon of shalmei simcha. That shalmei simcha is connected to chagiga, that you need it to be something acceptable for the chagiga. Now we're going to turn the page. We're on 8b. Mi shechagiga ba mehem, an animal that the carbon chagiga can come from, is acceptable for shalmei simcha, for the simcha sacrifice as well, and that would be that would exclude a meal offering and a bird offering. Yotzu elu shein chagiga ba mehem, these are excluded, the meal offering and the bird, because a chagiga cannot come from them, and that would exclude from shalmei simcha as well. The Gemara now continues, and interestingly enough, so this was a brisa. Then the Gemara says, Rav Ashi says, Mi v'samachta naf. Now I say this is an interesting thing, because very rare do you find an Amoira. Rav Ashi was an Amoira. He was one of the people who compiled the Gemara. This is quite a late Amoira, the rabbis of the Talmud. This is one of the latest rabbis of the Talmud.
It has to be.
And he is arguing on the brisa. The brisa says v'samachta b'chagecha. Rav Ashi says v'samachta. You can learn it from v'samachta. Very surprising. Normally, you don't argue. The Amoraim don't argue on a brisa or a mishnah, right? These are the Tanoim. Those are the Amoraim. But here, it's a little different. He's not arguing in halacha. He's
just saying you have enough to samachta. That's all.
That he's arguing that the source is a little different. You're saying the source is the samachta b'chagecha. I say you could learn it from the samachta alone.
Right.
So we see here an interesting thing, that they could argue in a way of learning something. They just can't argue in halacha, which is not necessarily the way we would have understood it until you see this Gemara.
Yeah.
Normally, you would think that the Amoraim don't argue at all on the Tanoim, and here he seems to be arguing and saying that you could learn it from v'samachta without the word b'chagecha. Now, what does he mean that you could learn from v'samachta that you can't use bird meat? You would need to use, or meal offering, it would like a carbon mincha. It would need to be a animal offering. How does he see that from v'samachta? The other opinion said v'samachta b'chagecha. Now that opinion we understand because it has to be an animal that's acceptable for a karban chagiga, a sacrifice that is also brought on the holiday, but those sacrifices had to be from animals. So we say this also has to be from an animal because it says b'chagecha, similar to the chagiga. But if you just learn it from the samachta, how do you see it has to be meat? It has to be an animal. So the understanding is that you don't have proper rejoicing unless the samachta means to rejoice. The understanding of the Gemara is you can't really rejoice without animal meat. Now, don't tell this to a vegetarian, but that's the way Rav Ashi sees it. That the samachta has to be specifically meat of an animal. That's how you could. That's how you really rejoice. Yotzu elo she'ein bahen simcha. These birds and meal offering do not have proper simcha, and real simcha is only with meat of an animal.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
on the first page of the book, the outside cover, it says Chagiga is Moed Katan. So what do they mean by that?
So Moed Katan and Chagiga often go together. In fact, some of the Gemaras have 4 or 5 tractates in the same volume. Beitza, Tainus, Megillah, Moed Katan, Chagiga. So it's 2 separate tractates that happen to be combined in one binding, just because they're the printer felt that it's too thin if they just put Chagiga alone. So they added Moed Katan with it, but it's not that. Moed Katan is really a tractate that talks about the laws of the intermediate days of festivals. That's really Moed Katan is about.
Okay, so Chagiga is not a Moed Katan.
It's not the same thing, no.
Okay,
There's Moed Katan and Chagiga. They're just the printer of the publisher of the Talmud felt it was too thin. So
say Moed Katan first. On yours, it doesn't say Moed Katan first. It says Moed Katan first, not Chagiga.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And generally, Moed Katan comes before
the first
Chagiga.
time he said it, he said Chagiga and Moed Katan, but Chagiga is the last volume in Moed.
Isaac, in Hebrew, you read it the other way.
No, I'm saying it should say Moed Katan Chagiga. That's all.
Anyway, okay. So the Gemara here mentions this idea of either v'samachta b'chagecha or v'samachta, but from one of these sources, it teaches us this law that the mitzvah on Yom Tov is to have sacrificial meat. Of course, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, we're talking, when you could have sacrificial meat, you should have sacrificial meat. The Gemara now says, "Rav Ashi, hai b'chagecha ma'yavid." So the Gemara asks, Rav Ashi just said that you don't need it to say b'chagecha to teach you about Chagiga, that it's similar to the Chagiga, because in truth, the Chagiga, it's not because you're comparing it to the Chagiga that it needs to be meat. It's because it has to be real simcha, and you want proper simcha. That's enough of a reason why it has to be real meat. So why does it say b'chagecha? Why does it need to add that word? So the Gemara answers, "Hahu, that word of b'chagecha, l'chadarav Daniel bar Katena." That is coming to teach us what Rav Daniel bar Katena said. The Amar of Daniel bar Katena, Amar Rav Daniel bar Katena says, in the name of Rav, how do we know that you're not allowed to marry a woman on any day throughout the holiday? You cannot marry a woman. And we're specifically talking about nisuin, the final act of marriage because the initial acquisition of marriage, called kiddushin, could be done on a holiday, but the final act of acquisition, which is called nisuin, that is not allowed to be done on a holiday. And how do we know it? Shenamar, as it says,
specifically Chalamoid.
Chalamoid.
Chalamoid, right?
Okay, but for sure, it includes Chalamoid.
Right.
It includes Chalamoid as well. And how do you know you can't do it? You can't marry a woman on the holiday. Shenamar, as it says, v'samachta b'chagecha, that you should rejoice on your chag, and v'loi be'ishtecha, and not with one's wife. In other words, that your joy should be the joy of the holiday, and not the joy of your new wife. If you were to get married on the holiday, your joy would be the joy of your new wife, and you would be minimize the joy of the holiday. And therefore, the pasuk says, "V'samachta b'chagecha," that you shouldn't get married on any day of the holiday. Now, the Gemara interestingly says you could get engaged, or you could have the first part of marriage on a holiday, and the reason for that is Shema Yikadmenu Acher. Maybe someone else is going to grab your spouse, and therefore you want to grab her first, so you can do the initial marriage part called the kiddushin, which would be considered giving the ring and saying Hareyat Mekudeshesli. By doing that initial part of marriage, that's where you're, so to speak, consecrating her to be yours, but you still can't have relations with her until you have the final part of marriage called Nisuin. And the Gemara there in Moyed Katan, and it does talk about it does mention there other reasons why not to get married on a holiday. One of the reasons there is that we are afraid that if you could get married on a holiday, we're afraid you're going to push off your wedding for the holiday. Why would you do such a thing? In the olden days, people were very poor. And being poor, the cheapest way to get married would be your Shabbos table, your Yontiv table. You get married and you're anyway having a meal for Yontiv. So that would be the meal. You get all your friends to come. They would bring their meals, their Yontiv meal, and you could have a wedding with all the community. Everyone would bring their meal to the table, and you could have a nice wedding. Problem is, you might push off your wedding for the holiday, and what's going to happen? What's so bad about that? If you push off your wedding for the holiday, the problem is called bittul pirya v'rivya. You're causing less children to be born. Why? Because instead of getting married Hanukkah time, you say, you know what? I'll push it off till Pesach. It'll be free. We'll have a free wedding. So push it off to Pesach. So you're going to potentially, there could be children. You could, you're pushing off the holiday, the wedding for later, and that's not appropriate. It's called bittul pirya v'rivya. And the Gemara does mention other reasons as well. It's called ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. Also, we shouldn't mix one joy, one rejoicing with another rejoicing, mixing two joyous occasions together. And basically, it has a few reasons over there, and these are some of them. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, there's that pasuk about on Yom Tov that you should rejoice and you should make your wife rejoice. So I guess like maybe somebody could make an argument that since the pasuk says you should make your wife rejoice, you need to have wife to make rejoice, which would mean that maybe you can also get married on Chol Hamoed, so you can make your wife rejoice.
Maybe that's the thought, that maybe that was the initial thought, that it should be allowed, but the conclusion is you can't. Interesting that Mordechai is bringing a verse where it says you should make your wife rejoice, but the thing is, right? So, but you wouldn't be able to get married, the final stage of marriage on Yom Tov, okay, or Chol Hamoed for that matter, on Chol Hamoed. Okay, so the conclusion here is that we might learn that from the pasuk of the V'samachta b'chagecha, meaning that is one way of learning it. There are other ways of deriving this law, but one of the ways of deriving this law is from the word b'chagecha. You should rejoice. It should be a rejoicing of the holiday and not a rejoicing of someone who just got married and his new wife. Now, it's interesting because you are allowed to get married the day before Yom Tov. The day before Yom Tov, you could get married, but you can't get married on Yom Tov or on Chol Hamoed. Okay, so that basically concludes this little piece of Gemara. We're going to continue with the next Mishnah now. The next Mishnah deals with the fact that each person has to consider what their financial situation is, and based on that, decide how to fulfill the mitzvahs of the holiday. So, for example, there's a korban oila brought called the oilas re'iyah. That sacrifice no one eats. It's all burnt. Oila means a burnt offering. It's all goes up to Hashem. But you also have shlamim sacrifices, peace offerings. And peace offerings are enjoyed by the person who brings them. His family, his friends. And the shalmei simcha are also offerings that are enjoyed by the owner. They're both peace offerings, and these both peace offerings are, you celebrate with these peace offerings. The thing is, you don't want to bring a very large offering if you don't have enough people to eat it, because what happens is the meat will get left over. It'll be called nicer leftovers, and that's a problem. It has to be burned. You're not allowed to leave meat over, and so a person has a small family, he might not want to buy too many shlamim, too many peace offerings. What happens if a person has a large family? He specifically will want to buy a lot of shlamim. So here the Mishnah tells us, a person who has a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of eaters, and they're going to want to, there's going to be a mitzvah for each of them to have simcha on Yom Tov. But they don't have a lot of money. Maybe shlamim merubim. They should bring many peace offerings because they need to have enough meat for the family. Va'oilais muatais, and a small amount of oilais, just what you're obligated to bring, the oilas re'iyah. But you wouldn't bring other burnt offerings because, you don't have the funds. Nechasim merubin va'ichlin muatim. What about if you have the opposite issue? You have a lot of money, but you don't have people to spend it on. So in that case, maybe oilais merubais, then you could bring a lot of korban oilais, burnt offerings, as it says in the pasuk, ish kematnas yodoi, a person, according to his generousness of his hand, and he should bring the more burnt offerings, because what's going to happen if he brings peace offerings? It's going to be left over. Now, Zev Muat, what happens if he has a small family and he also has a small amount of money? Al Zen Namar Ma'a Kesef. For this person, it says, just do the minimal. Just do the minimum. Ma'a Kesef. Bring a burnt offering, Ma'a, 1 silver coin, and Shtei Kesef, the peace offering. You bring 2 silver coins, following the opinion of Beis Hillel, and Zev Merubin. And if you have another scenario where someone has both, he has a lot of people, he's got a lot of money. So that person, Al Zen Namar, on this person, it says, Ish Kemat Nas Yodoi. Person, according to his gift of his hand, Keverkas Hashem Alekecha, Asher Nasan Lach, like the blessing of Hashem your God that He gave you. That's how you should serve Hashem and bring those type of sacrifices. So that's the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is basically telling us you got to look into your financial situation, your family situation, and based on that, decide if you're going to bring a lot of oilos, if you're going to bring a lot of shlamim. You can decide what you're doing for your sacrifices. The Gemara now says, and as I mentioned earlier, the Gemara does get into the previous discussion of if you're allowed to use Meiser Sheni money, which is the second tithe that you're anyway bringing to Jerusalem, could you use that for shlamim, for your peace offering, Talmud Chagiga? Could you use that money? And the Gemara earlier had mentioned, the Mishnah mentioned, according to Beis Hillel, that you could do something called teufelen. You could combine supplements. You could supplement. So now we're going to get into that. So let's take a look. The Gemara says, Shlamim merubin mehecha maisi. So let me tell you where we are. We're on page 8b by the Gimel Mem, very large letters, Gimel Mem, very bold. It's about maybe about 18 lines from the top. No, maybe about 16 lines from the top. Okay. Shlamim merubin mehecha maisi. A lot of shlamim. How is he going to bring it? Where does he bring it from? Mehecha, from where, Maisa, will he bring it? Halesle, he doesn't have any money. So, person who has a large family, but he doesn't have money, so you know what you should do? Bring a lot of shlamim, peace offerings. Yeah, I just said that he doesn't have a lot of money. How is he going to bring these peace offerings? So Amar Rav Chizda says, Teufel, we're talking about that he could combine the unconsecrated money together with the consecrated money, umevi, and he could bring with all the money together, har gadol. He'll bring a very large animal that will be able to feed his entire family. So what the Gemara is basically saying is that we're jumping back to this concept of teufel, and we're saying you don't have money to buy buy extra sacrifices. No problem. You use your Meiser Sheni money. You have Meiser Sheni money. You grew crops, and you have some money from your second tithing. Take that money and add it to your little money. You know, you don't have a lot of money, but you can pay your, your minimal amount of unconsecrated funds. And then on top of that, you'll put the consecrated money, the Meiser Sheni money. And then you could have a very large animal and you pay for your whole family.
Art Scroll says, and bring a bull. So is there a differential between the hierarchy of an animal relative to a supplemental sacrifice? If you're saying large animal, and
a bull is really the right it's literal. The literal translation is bull.
Okay.
But does it have to be a bull? A Korban Chagiga? You know what? I don't have it in front.
It's like, there's a distinction between bringing a bird or bringing an intermediate.
No, you can't bring a bird.
Then, a bull, which is, a large significant sacrifice. That's all.
Yeah, no. So that is correct. That it says the terminology in the Gemara is umevi par gadol, bring a large bull, and that would be for your shalmei chagiga for the whole family.
Okay.
And so the Gemara says that this sounds like it would answer the question. The only problem is that we had an argument about how to do teufel, how to do the supplement. Do you supplement money, consecrated money, with unconsecrated money? Is that the way to do it? Or do you supplement animals to other unconsecrated animals? And is that the way to do it? In other words, we are allowing you to do Meiser Sheni. Funds, to use Meiser Sheni funds for this purpose. We're having you, use these Meiser Sheni funds to fulfill your, your obligations here of your family having their Shalmei Chagiga, having their holiday sacrifice. But the problem is that we had an argument earlier how exactly to do it, and Rav Hizda seems to be clearly saying, according to only one of those views, he doesn't seem to be accepting the fact that there was an alternative view. He's saying, yeah, use all do the supplement of money to money. What about the animal to animal? Why didn't he give that alternative option as well? And he fits very well with Rabbi Yochanan, but he doesn't seem to fit with Chizkiah. So now keep in mind that we had, not only did we have these two opinions, but each one we found a source for them in a brisa. So Amar Lei, Rav Sheshes told Rav Hizda, Harei Amru Taiflin Behema LeBehema. We said that there was an alternative way of combining animals with other animals. So instead of putting the money together and buying one big bull, you could also put the money together, or not put the money together, keep the money separate and buy a number of small animals. You have the unconsecrated animal and you have consecrated animals. And you don't have to buy one big animal that's going to be a combination of both unconsecrated and consecrated funds. There was the alternative way of buying one fully unconsecrated animal, and the other animals could be fully consecrated, and you don't have to mix the two. You supplement it by having more animals, but not by having one animal that's a mixture of both consecrated and unconsecrated funds. So this is Rav Shesh's question. The Gemara wants to know exactly what he means. My ka'amarle, what is Rav Sheshes really saying? Ilay mahachi ka'amarle, is he saying? If you want to say that he's saying Harei Amru Taiflin Behema LeBehema Avaloi Mois, is he saying, if he's saying that you can't do the money option is not right, why are you saying to do the supplementing the money to money, that's not an acceptable way. If he wants to say that, the Malay, let him say, Ain Teuflin, let him just say straight, speak straight. You can't do money of supplementing money, unconsecrated money you have, and you want to supplement it with consecrated money. You can't do that. Ain Teuflin, mois. You can't supplement money with money or to other money. You supplement consecrated money to unconsecrated. You can't do that. So why isn't he saying that? Ella, rather, hachi amar le. He must be saying this. Hare amru af teiflin behemel lebehemel. They said that you could also do an alternative option, that you could do animals and add more animals. One animal will be fully unconsecrated, and the other animals will be consecrated animals. And you seem to be able to do that as well. Now, this is a little surprising because the Gemara before mentioned both of these views to be mutually exclusive and not accepting each other. And here, the Gemara seems to be saying that we are going to accept both views, and Rav Sheshes is bothered by Rav Chizda's statement because af teiflin behemel lebehema, you also can do behemel lebehema. Now, we never saw any such opinion. Af teiflin behemel lebehema. So Rav Sheshes is asking on Rav Chizda, what do you mean you could also do behemel lebehema? We never saw that. We did see an opinion that said you could do behemel lebehema. You could do a supplement animal to other animals, consecrated animals called Meiser Sheni animals to unconsecrated animals. That we do know you could do, but that would work without doing the money to money. In other words, that opinion would hold you can't do the money to money. But Rav Sheshes doesn't seem to have a problem with what Rav Chizda said. He has a problem with what he didn't say. In other words, Rav Sheshes says, what you said is okay, but you should have also said that you could do this as well. And you didn't do that. Now, we don't know of such an opinion that says you could do that as well. In other words, Rav Chizda said you could do the money, supplementing money, and buying one big bull. Rav Sheshes says you could also do an additional way. You can supplement animals to animals. So the Gemara is bothered with this statement of Rav Sheshes, that Rav Sheshes is arguing on Rav Chizda, and the Gemara is like, who is Rav Sheshes following? So that's what the Gemara goes through now. Kaman, who is this opinion of Rav Sheshes that he doesn't like what Rav Chizda said, or I should say he doesn't like the fact that Rav Chizda left out an alternative option. Everyone here. He doesn't like what Rav Chizda left out, but who is Rav Sheshes going according to? Come on, Deloike Chizkiah. Rav Sheshes doesn't seem to follow Chizkiah's view, because Chizkiah said you could do only the only option is to do animals, can supplement other animals. You could have consecrated animals as a supplement to the unconsecrated animal that you're going to buy from unconsecrated funds. That you could do, but you can't do the other option. You can't do money to money. That definitely doesn't follow Rav Sheshes, because Rav Sheshes was accepting the statement that you could do money to money. Udalai ki Rabbi Yochanan, and this also doesn't fit with Rabbi Yochanan, who says that you can only do money to money and you cannot do animals to animals. So who is Rav Sheshes really following? V'chiteiman, if you want to say that Rav Sheshes is not following any of them, and he has his own opinion, Amayroihu depligi. I'm sorry, Amayroihu depligi masnisa like pligi. Is it only the Amayroim and that Rav Sheshis would be able to argue on, it's also the Brisas seem to be arguing. And if the Brisas are arguing, so who would Rav Sheshis follow? V'hakatani, and didn't we learn in the Brisa, achila rishayna min hachulin, that the first eating for the Shalmei Chagiga would be completely from chulin. That would be behema supplementing consecrated animals called Meiser Sheni animals to the unconsecrated animal. That was the first eating, would be a solid eating of unconsecrated, achila rishayna min hachulin, which would mean that it has to be completely from unconsecrated funds, and you can't supplement money with money and buy one big animal. Because if you supplemented money with money and bought one big animal, you would end up eating partially consecrated animal, partially unconsecrated, because every little piece of that animal is going to have a little funds of unconsecrated funds and a little funds that are consecrated. So how would that work? So we have brisas that Rav Sheshis is not going to be fitting with. And the Gemara says, "My achila rishayna." It's not a problem. What does it mean, achila rishayna, that could be for the first eating is going to be from unconsecrated? It means the shir dmei achila rishayna min hachulin, that there has to first be an amount of money that is used for the carbon chagiga. It has to be that there has to be the amount of money that you would need to use to buy a carbon chagiga, which is two kesef, 2 coins of silver, and that's what it needs to be in this animal. But of course, the brisa is not saying that you would only be able to have an animal that's totally unconsecrated. You could really have an animal that is a mixture of consecrated and non-consecrated, as long as the value of the first eating is of unconsecrated funds. There's enough unconsecrated funds there that it would permit you to have this animal and fulfill your carbon chagiga obligation, because you put in enough unconsecrated funds, of which is the 2 silver coins. And by explaining the brisa this way, the brisa is not limiting how you fulfill your obligation of carbon chagiga. It's not limiting it to you how to use your option of supplementing. You could do both. You could have, as long as the achila rishayna is from chulin, it could be done however you want to do it. You could do the animal option. You could do the money option. As long as the first eating, there's enough of it, the value of it is chulin. That's good enough. So this is how Rav Sheshis is learning. So what it actually does is it changes our way of understanding. So we have 3 opinions now, 2 ways of reading this brisa, and 3 opinions as to how you could supplement the carbon shalmei chagiga of the holiday. And even though you might be struggling financially, there is a way to supplement with your Meiser Sheni money, which you will use towards an animal or a few animals, and that money will be kosher to be used and fulfill your carbon chagiga obligation. So we have 3 views. Again, we have Rabbi Yochanan who says you can only supplement money with money by 1 big bull. We have Chizkiah who said you could only supplement animals to animals and have a few animals, and you cannot do the money to money option. And the first animal would be totally unconsecrated, and the other animals the succeeding animals would be completely consecrated. That would be fine. And then you have the opinion of Rav Sheshus that says, either way, you can do it this way, you can do it that way. And he has a brisa that he translates to mean this as well. So that's basically these three opinions of how to supplement and how would a poor person fulfill the obligation of Karban Chagiga for his whole family. You would supplement it with Meiser Sheni money. Now, I just want to clarify one thing, and that is that when I speak about a Meiser Sheni animal, that's different than a Meiser Behema animal. There's Meiser Behema animals, and then there's Meiser Sheni animals. Meiser Behema animals means that you have flock, and they gave birth during this period, this year, this period between the last holiday and this holiday. And so you take those animals that it gave birth to, and you put them in a narrow pen, and you have them go through a gate and come out. And as they come out, count each one. And the 10th one is going to be called Meiser Behema, and that has to be slaughtered as a sacrifice. But then you have something called Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is produce. Your produce you're supposed to celebrate with in Jerusalem. So let's say you have a plum tree, and your plums gave you 100 cases of plums this year. So you want to bring 10 cases of plums to Jerusalem to celebrate. Well, you have a horse and a wagon, but 10 cases of plums might be too much for your old horse and wagon. And therefore you say, you know what, let me switch it over for money. So you take those 10 cases of plums, you say each case is worth $100. That's $1,000 of plums. You take $1,000, say this money is exchanged for these Meiser Sheni plums, and you take that $1,000 to Jerusalem, and there you can celebrate with that money. You don't have to buy a sacrifice, but we're telling you that you need to provide your family with Chagiga. They have to celebrate. They have to fulfill the obligation. So therefore, take that $1,000 and use it as a way of supplementing your Meiser Sheni, and we have the way of supplementing your Karban Chagiga, your peace offering of the holiday. And that's how you supplement it, is either by putting your money to the money you're going to spend for the sacrifice and buy one big bull, or you put your money and you buy many animals, and the unconsecrated money, you buy a small little animal for the Karban Chagiga, the initial Karban Chagiga that you're going to partake of. And the additional animals can be this $1,000 that you have set aside anyway. So you don't have to spend the whole $1,000 on the holiday. You have this money that's consecrated. That's called Meiser Sheni animal. That you're buying an animal with Meiser Sheni money because you're going to be using it as a Karban Chagiga, but it's as a supplement Karban Chagiga. So we're going to stop here and wish you a good day. I'll see you later, Mitzvah Hashem. Thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.